All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Allison Murphy. I'm a faculty member here in the College of IST, and I'm responsible for helping to organize some of the speakers in Startup Week, so it's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. But today I'm here to welcome our speaker, Andrew Weinert. Andrew was actually here in the College of IST. He graduated in 2009 with a BS in SRA, Security and Risk Analysis, and he also obtained 2 minors. IST with a focus in aerospace engineering, which I didn't even know existed, really cool.
Doesn't even exist anymore.
Yes, see, you were unique. And a minor in natural science as well, so a lot of interdisciplinary focuses there. He also went on to receive his master's in science from Boston University, where he got his degree in electrical and computer engineering, right? So technical, as well as some other different interdisciplinary spaces. Now, upon graduation, he did something really cool. He joined MIT's Lincoln Laboratory, which I'm sure he'll talk to you a lot about today. It's a great place to conduct research and continue to collaborate with different industries as well as academia. He works on what's called the Humanitarian Assistance and Disaster Relief Systems Group, right? And they focus on information systems that support some areas you're probably interested in, drone airspace integration, as well as public safety. On a personal note, he continues to stay involved with the College of IST. He actually serves on our alumni board. And he also holds an FAA remote pilot certification, as well as an FCC amateur radio license. With that being said, if we can please welcome Andrew Weinert to Startup Week.
All right, yeah, so I'm Andrew Weinert. I graduated in 2009. I did have classes in this room, so this is very cool for me. Other Penn State related questions I'll get out of the way. Cafe 210 was my favorite bar, and I lived off campus, and I was on the swim team. So this is going to be 2 talks. First, I'm going to kind of give you an overview of Lincoln Laboratory. I'm going to play a fun game. Who here has heard of Lincoln Laboratory before? All right. I never heard of Lincoln Laboratory either until I met them at the career fair. Lincoln's always kind of a fun place to talk about because we're actually a $1 billion a year laboratory that almost nobody knows about. So I'm going to kind of talk about the laboratory overview, hopefully give you a sense of how you can do research without going to industry, and also kind of do research that, you know, we do a lot of startup related things, but we're not startups. And then we'll get deep dive into some of the data set and kind of more the data science specific things that I actually do. So what is Lincoln Laboratory first? So we're something called a federally funded research and development center, FFRDC. This is different than ARL here on campus, but we have this great, very vague goal of technology in support of national security. And that can mean many different things. But Lincoln's got, you know, kind of 3 strong strengths that we provide to the U.S. government and the nation as a whole. So we do systems architectural engineering. So we take big problems and we figure out how to make them work. We do long-term technology development. And so this is generally, due to the way we're structured, we're nonprofit, we have strict no conflict of interest. We also have policies where we're not supposed to compete with industry. So if industry can build a widget, even if they are not building it, if they can build it, that's not a role Lincoln should be. So we're always looking ahead in the future. And then finally, we prototype. We build things. We don't just do white papers. We actually go out and get our hands dirty. And across, you know, national security, we have many mission areas up here. But it's important to note that, you know, while we are a DoD laboratory, I am an MIT employee. My paycheck comes from MIT. I go to the MIT gym, MIT bank, all those things. So I am not a DoD employee. And you see up on this map here, you know, air traffic control, humanitarian systems, advanced technology. So we're not, you know, all, you know, focused on DoD. It's a very, $1 billion goes a long way across many different areas. One of the kind of hallmarks of the Lincoln approach, and the Lincoln approach is, you know, something very startup related. And if you want to think about how to do technology development, so if you want to create a startup, if you want to go out and build something, what's the right way to do this? And so the Lincoln development approach is, you know, this cyclical thing. We first really focus on user experience and testing. Do not build something that says, oh, I know the end users want this, without talking to the end users, spend time, money, effort, throw it over the wall and say, here's your rock, and they're like, that's not the rock I wanted. It's not good for the end users, it's not good for you. So So going out into the field, talking to end users, understanding exactly what their needs are is critical. So we do that. We go out, we talk, and we'll talk a little bit later today about some of the things we've done there. We then go do the analysis and like, well, what should the system be? We'll then go prototype it. So this is to either build out a data set, build out algorithms, or actually build out real hardware. We'll iterate on it. And then ultimately, if you want to play bingo, a favorite key phrase I say, technology transition. Our goal is to develop technology for the nation to be a risk reduction in some cases, to prove that a concept is possible. So we'll build the first one or two of a widget, and then we will hand that off to industry. We'll hand that off to government and say, great, build hundreds, thousands, millions of these widgets. We're going to move on to the next problem. And so recent technology transitions, once again, very wide, everything from biological sensors to charge-coupled devices for advanced imaging. What does it mean to actually work at Lincoln? So yes, I graduated undergraduate, and I was hired in that bachelor pool. So about 20% of the staff's bachelors. When you come in for a bachelor's, the lab definitely wants you to get your master's or get some really kick-ass, awesome experience. But that goal is definitely on the master's. And so I actually got a fellowship through the lab where they helped me get through grad school. And I'm now in that master's pool. But there's a good chunk of doctorates here. And this is not meant to be an intimidating slide. But the emphasis here is, we have a lot of smart people getting together and a lot of synergies to be talking amongst each other. So if I have a cybersecurity question, I am not a cybersecurity expert. But I could very easily walk down the hall and actually talk to the cybersecurity experts with PhDs who know all of that. And that synergy is very, very clear, especially when you start thinking about technology development. You can't necessarily do it yourself. You may have an idea for a startup, but understanding who to collaborate with is arguably sometimes more important than the idea itself, because you're going to help each other across the finish line. You can see the distribution there, but we have everything from chemists to computer science to physics. Electrical engineering has become a catch-all. I've never taken an electronics class in my life, but my piece of paper says electrical engineering. So we're going to quickly just get a sense of actually what this means. So air missile defense technology, a lot of field testing, going out, designing architectures. This is my research division. And so we do things from defense, security, air traffic control, and this could be weather systems. So for example, after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, their NEXRAD weather radar was destroyed. By destroyed, I mean it wasn't there anymore. And so we, the nation, lost a capability to do weather surveillance over the Caribbean. This is a national security problem, but this is also a problem that affects everybody in this room, because if we can't estimate and monitor the weather, that means it's harder to plan to go into the Caribbean and vacation and all those things. So the laboratory helped the FAA and other agencies to provide a short-term capability to fill in those gaps. We do cybersecurity, obviously of interest to the IST crowd here. A lot of what we're focusing on is, once again, that prototyping, cyber range developments. We have an operations center. What are the metrics? That's a common question that we're asked. What are the metrics? And when you start thinking about technology development, how do you know you're building the right thing? How do you measure that? Cybersecurity is, often this vague thing. Like, how do I know what was compromised? How do I evaluate that? And it's something the lab is very interested in. We do communication, so everything from laser comms to RF missions. One of the big things the lab has done to kind of give you a sense of the type of problems that we like to work on. A few years ago, the laboratory designated laser comm to the moon. So we shot a laser and we got, world record speeds of the internet to and from the moon. And so that, is a one-off system, very expensive, but we go out and we demonstrated that, yes, you can put incredibly high speeds via lunar laser comm. And I think I'll stop there with the exception of we have our own flight facility. So that big cutout there is our 707. We actually, yes, have our own 707, multiple Gulfstreams, Cessnas, Twin Otters. We have RS system chambers. And so these are all data science things. So for example, we go out and we deploy sensors on aircraft. Well, we want to do some compute while flying. All right, well, aircrafts are fairly, constrained spaces. So when you start thinking about size, weight, and power, okay, how much power do I have for a computer? All right, I have this much compute. What do I actually want to produce? All right, and then how do I design the algorithms to produce what I want on board? How do I store that data on an aircraft? How do I validate, verify, make sure that doesn't become corrupted? And so one thing, if you want to take away, while I can call myself a data scientist, I really don't. I call myself a research engineer, and I use data science to help me do what I like. I like drones and I like airplanes, and that's what I do. And data science is that tools to allow me to install really cool sensors on really cool airplanes. Lastly, the laboratory has our quick little marketing pitch here. Community and educational outreach is something that we are very important about and constantly growing. So if you enjoy helping high school students with robotics, K through 16 STEM, Girls Who Build, all of them, these are things that the laboratory strongly encourages, and it's always fun to go build robots. All right, so that is the whirlwind tour of Lincoln Laboratory. And what's really kind of important to note there is we do research. I am, like I said, an MIT staff member. And one nice thing compared about not being in startup is that my research, if I was wrong or the research doesn't pan out, I'm not going under, and I'm still going to have that paycheck and kind of the stability, which is very important. And so there are trade-offs. And, one nice thing also about kind of the research community is I still get to throw out those really, really crazy ideas, and sometimes they do get funded, and I get to build out, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work, and sometimes crazy ideas lead to crazier ideas, and you get to go down that rabbit hole. But there is that kind of bit of a safety net compared to when you're completely out there as a startup. So we're going to talk about one of those crazy ideas I had. So who here has ever weathered a hurricane, hunkered in place? Who here has ever been in a past tornado area, landslides, anything like that? Who here has ever had their power cut off during a storm? What if I told you it's actually still really hard to figure out what is the status of the power lines after a storm? What if I told you basic questions like, I want to know all bridges that were flooded is actually still a really hard problem? Well, they are. And we're going to talk about why they're hard and what we're doing to make them less hard. And also provide opportunities for folks who are not me to develop those capabilities. So the bottom line is, when you think about data science, we often think about machine learning, computer vision, big data analytics. It's really great to say, oh, we're going to do big data and data science, and we're going to build this analytic. Well, what do you need? You need training data. So you need to be able to find data that's representative of the problem that you want to solve. The problem is, if you look at public safety compared to the commercial space, there's less money in public safety. You also have to recognize that public safety, especially law enforcement, there's privacy and sensitivity issues, so it's harder to get data. And so we're going out and we're going to try to build out a data set of both operational and representative video to enable data science on public safety data. If you don't believe me, the federal government has said this, and I think it's one of the most important quotes out of the public safety space to come out, is that, once again, data is king. You can develop all the fanciest algorithms. You can do really clever database design. You can be really computationally efficient. But if you don't have data to actually plug that in, let alone good data, it's just going to be garbage in, garbage out. And so when we start thinking about public safety, you go, okay, what's the future of public safety? Well, we're going to stream video. What video? And the room generally goes quiet. And then you're like, well, we're going to stream all video. And then you're like, no, that's a very bad idea. Why is that very bad? Well, one, we don't have all the bandwidth available to stream data, all that video. It's expensive. You got to pay for that data plan. So imagine, you were streaming body cam footage 24/7. Just imagine how much, if you stream Netflix or YouTube on your phone in an hour, how much data you're eating up over cell. Forget about Wi-Fi. And so what we're trying to do is develop, one, this data set, but two, what should we actually be streaming? What analytics should exist? And then how can we provide the data to enable those analytics? So we go out and we talk to public safety. And this could mean, once again, I call that technology development process. What does that actually mean? So I am not a cop, I'm not a firefighter, I am not FEMA, I am a research engineer. So we go out and we talk to them, we sit with them. And what this means is I've been on a ride-along in Atlantic City with a cop. I've lit a car on fire at a fire academy. I've sat right next to a dispatcher in a 911 center. And we listen. And, a lot of it is you don't do this, interview like, okay, what did you do? You watch and you listen. And we're not talking about data science, technical algorithms, MongoDB with them. We're trying to understand, what do you actually do? And so let's start with the Atlantic City ride-along. So we're there, and he's like, well, I'm looking for a guy. All right, and so we're driving around. What do we notice? Well, he's by himself. He has no buddy. The whole buddy cop system you see on TV is not real. Majority of officers operate in a single officer by themselves. Now, statistics have shown that when two officers work together, the risk and the risk of them being assaulted or killed is drastically lower, which is great. But we don't have enough cops. This is a matter of fact. So most cops operate by themselves in a single vehicle. So he's driving around, he's looking for somebody, and he's like, oh, I think that's the guy I was looking for. He had a picture. He was actually like, normally I don't even get a picture, I get a description. So it was a really good day for him. Meanwhile, while we're doing this, part of it is part of his comfort. And so a lot of agencies have started to wear body armor, for example. And I've always heard body armor is really uncomfortable to wear, and maybe that's why an officer may or may not wear them. So I'm there, I'm wearing the body armor with him. Has nothing to do with data science, right? Why am I wearing body armor? I'm trying to understand how they're operating. And you know what? It's true. Right on the back of there, like it doesn't sit right, and I even had to do it for a few hours. It's just not comfortable. So when you start thinking about technology development, what capabilities I want to build for public safety, it's not just the algorithm. You have to think about how they're operating. All right, so he has his body cam on, and sure enough, he goes around, and he actually does bring, it was the person he was found. And, I've read the stories, so the FBI puts out narratives of people assaulted and killed. And one of the big things about public safety is how quickly things can go bad or south. So you could be talking to somebody, and within tens of seconds, a foot pursuit can start. They can pull a weapon, and how do you help the officer not get into that scenario? How do you minimize that risk? And part of it is this situational awareness. So we get out of the car, and what does he do? All right. Now let's think about it from a technical standpoint, what he's functionally doing. And at the time, he actually did not do this. So I'm out of if I want to turn on my body camera to start recording, I have to physically hit a button. If I want to notify PSAP, I now have to hit a different button and communicate to them. So for situational awareness, that's 2 steps they have to do. And sure enough, often these times, you can read narratives where, an officer is assaulted or killed, and they don't know why the officer was out of their car. That's an exact quote from a bunch of these narratives. We don't know why the officer got out of their car. So there's a lack of situational awareness of what the officer is doing. Now, this is not every time, but it is sometimes, and it's a problem. And so, sure enough, we book him, and everything is fine. But what if something bad happened? Well, the officer didn't know dispatch that he was out of the car. Dispatch did not know that he was with a suspect of interest. The camera's not on. This is a problem. So sure enough, a few days later, I'm at a totally different jurisdiction. I'm sitting right next to a dispatcher, and I sat 2 days next to them. Sure enough, it happened. They get a call, and they're like, law enforcement officer calls in, and they're like, hey, I just got this guy from a traffic stop. I'm going to be bringing him in. And dispatch, like, I did not know he was out of that car. What if something happened? And dispatch, like, I don't need that video to be streamed. I simply need it. It would have been really great if I knew they were out of their car. Can you make something so I know they're out of their car, so I have a better situational awareness on what they're doing? And they're like, I don't want to see that video. Why do they want to see their video? Have you ever been to a 911 dispatch center? They have like 7 monitors, 3 keyboards, a pedal. I'm not joking. Literally 3 keyboards, 7 monitors. I cannot go in there as a technology developer and say, I'm going to add an 8th monitor that you now have to do video surveillance, something you're not trained on. That's not an acceptable answer. However, if we can say, well, what if you had like a stoplight chart? You know, red, green, officer, of all your officers that are in or out of their car. And they're like, yeah, we can glance up, we can look, we can use our training as dispatchers to like maybe call in, like, hey, I saw you out of the car, what's going on? If they knew they're out of their car, they're like, I could prepare backup resources faster. So if something happened, I'm now ready to respond. Additionally, we're respecting the officer's privacies here. We don't need to be streaming that video constantly. But it's good to know they're out of their car. It's good to know if they're talking to somebody. And these are all the type of now, we went from what's your day-to-day to now technical requirements that are effectively now we're in classic data science. I need to develop an analytic that determine if an officer is in or out of their vehicle given these compute requirements for the body cam of the future, and now I need this training data. All right, so can we promise that to public safety? Is that something I can reasonably go back to the folks I talked to? I'm like, you know what? I can build a data set to get you that capability. And so we went out and we tried a bunch of things. And this is not public safety specific now. This is just pure computer vision and data science. So we as humans are getting very good at building AI robots to do object detection for common things. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. They are susceptible to noise. And noise can be many different things. And there's a lot of research done between training accuracy and computational load. Semantic techniques. So this is not, the bounding box around an image. This is saying an image has a picture of a bridge in it, bridge semantically. This is more used by the natural language and processing community, but you're getting a better context of the image. And it's also getting a lot easier to train these models. So you can honestly start doing deep neural network work with 30 lines of code. Now, you may not be developing the right type of deep neural net, but you can get up and running with literally less than 100 lines of code these days. And so we're saying, well, yeah, analytics can find things. Larger objects are harder. But you have to really start thinking about public safety. Okay, they operate at night. They're moving a lot. The imagery is not going to be as crisp.
So you're trying to use the imagery to determine whether an officer is inside their car?
That's right.
Can I suggest another option?
You can try.
I was just thinking you putting an RFID into their badge, and then if it's out of that range of the RFID sensor,
So I'm glad you asked this question. Do you, will the RFID be able to determine if they're next to the car or indoor or outdoor of the car?
just be like a range.
So is it important to know if an officer is standing next to their car or if they're actually sitting in their car?
That's true. I was just thinking distance from the car.
Do you have to pay to integrate a custom solution with that RFID chip?
Well, obviously you got to pay.
But they already invested in the body cams.
Oh, that's true.
So most agencies have already invested in the body cams. So as a technology developer, where can I get the biggest bang for my buck with the widest market? I am not going to make any money off of this. I am non-profit. I'm largely open sourcing all my work. So I'm not trying to corner the market here. I'm just trying to do the right thing. All right, so what we did was, it was very engineering. Okay, we were tasked to build out a video data set, and that was it. Very nice high-level question. Do I do CCTV cameras? Do I do body cams? Do I do drone cameras? I didn't know going in. And what we found is, okay, body cams have the widest adoption rate. So if I was going to develop a piece of technology, I want the widest adoption rate, body cameras. CCTV cameras are great for very specific things. There's nothing wrong against them. Analytics need to be developed for them. But in terms of widest adoption, biggest bang for your buck, body cams became the clear answer. And as you start going down this road, what are body cams used for? Well, they're always on. They're not necessarily recording it. They're always, always on. So the camera is seeing the inside of their car. So why can't we start, and this is kind of the fun part of the research for me, is, well, what is the body cam of the future? Why can't we put analytics on the body cam to do these things? If we can do that, I don't need to make custom modifications to the cars. I don't need to do all these other things. Why can't I just do it with the body cam? And so that's what we're setting out to do. Now, obviously, having different sensors in the car, having biometric sensors, these are all great. We should use them when possible. But if you start thinking about from a nationwide perspective, and that is something that we at Lincoln always, always, always strive to. Remember, technology in support of national security, national. Body cams is the lowest common denominator. So how can we better leverage them? Additionally, body cams are largely used in a forensic capability right now. You know, something happens and then they release, you know, we've all seen the news footage, right? Something happens and the police release the body cam to see, oh, the officer was justified or not. Why can't body cams act as a second pair of eyes for the officer? Why can't the body cams work for the officers more? So you're right, RFID is an option, but when you start thinking about the nuance, it's very important to know if I'm indoor, out of the car, or not out of the car. Especially when you think about, okay, there's an officer down. Do you want to know if the officer is in his car or if the officer is outside of his car? And so range is, you know, you got to have to be razor thin there. So let's start thinking about, once again, we're going down this road, and I'm very glad you pointed this out because I did not expect that I would build a data set about me putting body cameras on and driving. That's what public safety is. And the only way that I knew that is by actually sitting and talking to them. So now it's my job as a technology developer to figure out, okay, they told me they want to have better situational awareness of what an officer is doing. What is safety critical? What is mission critical? And they love to say, well, it depends, right? It depends. So what does that mean? If you were told, and you will face this, it's not like a homework assignment where you have a right or wrong answer. What is it? It means what's context? And so if I showed you a picture of anything, and I say, is the officer in danger, or this is a high-risk scenario, I bet everyone in this room would have different criteria, right? What is high risk? How do I know what the body cam should do? How do I know that the officer is in danger? Danger is this stuff. It's not this concrete object. And what I would imagine is you would start probably answering questions to me, right? And start thinking about a game of 20 questions. Well, is the officer in or out of their car? Not if they're near their car. Are they in or out of their car? Is it nighttime? Is the officer prone on the ground? Is someone's in the officer's view? Is the officer running? These are all yes-no questions. Why did I propose them as yes-no questions? Well, they're Booleans. They're easier to train an analytic on. They're easier when you start thinking about data management, data storage. What am I producing? And so we say, okay, well, why can't we? They're Booleans, right? So if the body cam of the future can figure out if an officer is in or out of their car, that's kilobytes worth of data. Now, public safety operates, obviously, in incident disasters, when things hit the fan and comms are bad. Maybe you don't have the bandwidth available to stream video. But here, with these analytics, all we're envisioning is unique kilobytes. That's it. And so when you start thinking about what does it mean to be operationally ready, this is very, very key. Additionally, with kilobytes, you don't have to eat up that data plan that they're paying for, because they are paying for that data plan.
So is the analytics, is that like performed on-site, or is it streamed to like a server and then online?
So it could be both. And this is where I think it's an opportunity for you guys and for industry to take on. What I'm putting out here is I have listened, I've gone out into the field of public safety, and I am taking their operational non-technical requirements, translating them to a technical speak, and then saying this is what this is a vision that is attainable because we did the feasibility analysis of what's actually happening, and this is what you can build with our data set. And so I'm in this very interesting position where I'm tasked to figure out what analytics are needed, how to build them, to provide the data, but my sponsor does not want me building the analytics. It eats me up inside, but he's right. Because now my mission is to make sure I'm judged on people using my data. So if I just said, okay, I collected body cam footage, and I release that to my sponsor, and I release that to the community, so what? What are you going to do with that data? And this is where this part's the important. We're saying, I collected this type of data because I know public safety wants this type of capability. And so here are some examples. We have not built all of these, but you can start thinking about, it depends, right? And so here is some representative footage. And we did this. We put cameras on. So is this a high-risk scenario? Raise your hand if you think this is a high-risk scenario where dispatch should know what was going on and we should start putting like emergency protocols in place.
Another question?
Yeah.
Is it high risk to the officer only or also potential victims?
It depends.
This guy could be like having a heart attack.
He could be. He could be. It depends. This is real.
I thought I saw a little redness at the top, so he could have been shot.
Where? That's his shirt.
Oh, that's just design.
But you can start, you guys are definitely thinking about it now.
But a camera wouldn't know the difference.
Can you teach a camera to know the difference? Is that an analytic that can or should be developed? So let's start with the basics first, though. Blood, weapon. We chose not to do weapons in this data set. Why is that? Does anybody think why I do not want to do weapon being pulled?
Cameras are stupid. They're going to think a super soaker is a weapon.
That is true. That is not the only answer. So who here has heard of YOLO v3 Darknet? Yes, and it is called You Only Look Once, YOLO. So YOLO is one of the most popular open source object detection right now. There's about 75 different things it'll claim to pick up. One of them is cell phones. And so we actually took real footage of an officer pulling a weapon during a car chase. And what did it classify the gun as? Cell phone. That is bad. Very, very bad. Additionally, when you pull a weapon, you do not want to, that analytic cannot be wrong. False positives are not acceptable. You know, if the officer is out of their car, yes, no. Is it life or death that I inaccurately labeled that they're out of the car? Probably not. And so we start thinking about user adoption here. We're talking about the body cam of the future, running analytics on the body cam, or maybe in the vehicle or in the cloud, and all these things. We need to make sure they trust it or adopt it. And if I come in there and say, yeah, it can do the weapon, and you know it's wrong 10% of the time. No, no. But if I say, you know what, it does the in-vehicle, maybe it's wrong 10% of the time, they may be more willing to adopt that because it's not that safety critical. Additionally, why else did we not pick weapons? Well, think about it. And so we reread these narratives. I read hundreds of narratives of officers being killed. Most officers are not within 10 feet. So by the time that weapon is pulled, what can the analytic do? How does that change the outcome of the officer being shot? Now, mind you, by the time that weapon's pulled, it's at close range, and the officer is likely to be shot within seconds.
Well, isn't there some good machine learning things out there to determine like body posture so we can determine aggression?
Boom. Seconds.
I mean, by the time you figure out that the guy has a gun, it's already too late to let the dispatch know he's going to be shot.
That's exactly right. I'm not saying an analytic to detect a weapon is not useful. What I'm saying is if you look at, once again, the biggest bang for your buck, by the time that weapon is pulled, it's up, what's the analytic can do? Because you're right. We can probably, if we had all that training data, we can probably pull an analytic by the time to identify the weapon is pulled. but the analytic needs to identify it and needs to communicate it to the officer. The officer then needs to react to it. And we're doing all this in a matter of seconds with an analytic that has effectively incredibly stringent operational requirements on it. So what's important here is, once again, thinking about biggest bang for your buck. We're talking about the body cam of the future here. We're talking about what is possible for the widest potential adoption. And being to the operational requirements, being to the frame rate requirements. Weapons is not a adoption requirements. It's a nice to have, but it's not a must have for that initial adoption.
Kind of irrelevant, but it kind of reminds me of Jarvis trying to help the officer out.
That's right. Now, if an officer is shot and they're down on the ground, you may not see the weapon. You may just see the officer prone. That's the piece of information that's important. The officer is prone and damaged, not necessarily the weapon, because they may be stabbed, they may have been beaten, they may have tripped. Or what if we could start thinking about, how do we help the officer not get in that situation? So one thing we've heard from the law enforcement is, they're running through a neighborhood, they're going through bushes, over fences, you're going to become disoriented geospatially, and they get ambushed. So let's think about Skynet here. What if a drone popped out the back of a police cruiser and followed the suspect, and then the drone realizes, hey, the suspect stopped, and they're now in an ambush scenario. Cop, don't round that corner. If he doesn't round that corner, he may not be shot at close range. And so think big picture, and that is creepy, that is science fiction. But it's happening. There are a lot of commercial interest. If you buy a DJI Mavic, if you buy a Skydio R1, what do they market? We can track humans. And so the commercial industry is already very invested on tracking humans. Why can't we take that technology and try to make our public safety officers safer? Okay, let me finish this thought and hopefully sure. So let's think about this in practice. So hopefully I can convince you that Booleans are nice primitive analytics. Well, if I told you if somebody was nighttime, they're running, there's a person in view, and they're out of their vehicle, those four things sound like a foot pursuit. And we know foot pursuits are dangerous. So maybe the body cam starts recording. So remember how I talked about how they had to hit that button? Maybe they forgot to hit that button. Body cam starts recording. Remember how I told you how they had to communicate? Maybe it notifies dispatch. Why not? Maybe the camera requests higher priority over the cell network so that video stream can be crystal clear. All of these fun things on the right side are enabled by what? These analytics. And how do we build those analytics? By providing that data set. If we did not have a data set of people putting body cams on and driving around, I can't build that analytic. And so we did that. We literally put body cams on, and I've driven for hours in cameras. And you know what? That's what public safety does. And I know it sounds crazy, but I've gone to multiple agencies, and they're like, yeah, that's great. And what starts coming now is you get these what-ifs. Because the commercial, who does that? We don't do that in our day-to-day life. We don't put cameras on our chest, and we drive around town, and we knock on doors to serve warrants. Like, we don't do that. But public safety does. That is really what they do. They do a lot of dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. And so talking to industry members, like, oh, maybe you can look at the rear and side view mirrors and figure out what's behind the officer. Maybe we can figure out, if the officer's out of their car, but also what's behind the officer, because the camera may see it. Or, talking to another agency, one of their biggest costs, both in terms of money and manpower, is redactions. And so everything up to this point, we've been talking about tactical. They're like, well, what if I know if an officer's in the car, he's probably not talking to somebody, I probably don't have to redact that portion of the video, which will then enable them to put out more data to the public faster and cheaper and more efficient. So other things is this website is live for now, but it may not be live come fall as we do the technology transition. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this now, but I have about 4 terabytes worth of data. That's a fun data science problem. So how do we manage that? And we're going to talk about a different example to drive that home. I'll I'll take your question while that pulls up. We are still putting out Mechanical Turk. And one interesting that is an ethical question on Mechanical Turk. Do you strive to pay minimum wage? A lot of the people on Mechanical Turk are not U.S. citizens. They're not from the U.S. Oh, sorry. So Mechanical Turk is you can upload tasks to Amazon and have people work on it. So we bring up and we load our video, our images up, and then we tell them to draw. Body cam footage. Who here has heard of the Civil Air Patrol? Oh, all right. So Civil Air Patrol, this is a U.S. Air Force auxiliary. So what happens is after a disaster, these folks are in Cessnas with Nikon cameras, and they take pictures of disasters. That sounds great, right? The nice thing about them is they release their imagery. So there are hundreds of thousands of images at low altitudes of disasters. The problem is that's all it is. And you want to know what the data looks like? Where is it? Here, this. So there is a GUI. I will give them that credit. The data is not all their data. It's only the most recent ones. But there's no search functionality. Like I said, how do I look for bridges? So as a data scientist, this is really what we're looking at. How do you take this very, very nice raw data and transform it for both response and research? And this is where, once again, I say I do data science, but I am not a data scientist. I am a technologist for public safety. And this is it. This is real data on the public internet. You can see there's the FEMA link. They put it up. And so one of my jobs as a researcher is to improve this. So I look at this from a research standpoint. Holy crap. There are 400,000 images of things that I care about that are not annotated. If I want it representative, this is operational. This is real data. So let's look at it. This is real. This is real data from the Carolinas and Florence. What do you see here? There's a flood. Is a flood a thing? It's a stuff. So when you start thinking about annotation, how do you store this as in a database? But how, if I wanted to provide annotations and labels, how do I index this?
Flood picture.
How do I know where a flood is?
Well, you see the history of the bridge.
Was there?
Roadway or some sort of.
Could have been a floor too.
Yeah.
What you're trying to say is that because all pictures are stored in pixels, and then they only have integers as what color the picture is, and then to sum up, that picture does not make any sense to the computer as to what is the picture about.
That's part of it. I'll let you guys keep brainstorming. This is not talking.
It looks like it can also be the aftermath of the storm.
Could be. So when we start thinking about data scientists, I want to label these images. And that's what we are doing. So there's things called things and stuff. Things are nice, discrete objects. Houses, cars, right? I can put a nice bounding box around a car. I'll get to that one soon. Stuff. Fire, floods, damage. It's more nebulous. How do we teach a robot, an AI, what flooding is? It looks like water. Water can be fine, can be appropriate. Do I care if it's flooded. Well, here we obviously do care because there was a road, and now the road's underwater. So I can honestly tell you right now, there is no capability right now to say, show me all flood imagery. That's something that we want to enable out of this. Now, why is that? Well, disasters, incidents are rare events. Why would the commercial entities develop capabilities, go out and try to collect and label all this data if they're not going to make a bang out of it for an event that's only going to happen once or twice a year? And that's the reality. And so if you look at things like popular data sets, like Microsoft Common Objects and Context COCO, it has thousands of images of teddy bears and toilets. Why? Because that's what we do in our day-to-day lives. This is not something we do in our day-to-day lives.
Actually have a internship at an insurance company for property and casualty, and I think
They do care.
yeah, I'm a data scientist, so they would definitely care about that.
And so we'll skip ahead to this point then. I have everything about public safety. Is you have to start thinking about what is public safety. Follow the money. So we have hopefully hammered market reach, market penetration. Insurance companies really do care about this. If we dim the lights, you can see here there are power lines. Utilities care about this. Yeah, so here's the pole, here's the power lines. So yeah, they care about this. So what does that mean to be public safety? As a technology developer, how can I develop a piece of technology, once again, technology transition, to make it successful? The insurance companies know about this. And so understanding this is how do we market it, how do we get this out the door? To really hammer home why this is important. So we took some of these imageries and we put it through, actually we'll do this first. Sorry, I don't have slides because I just wrote this paper. So what do we label first? Everyone threw out some examples. So the first table, table 1, is we talked to a search and rescue operator from the state of New Hampshire. I'm like, what do you look for as a human? Because once again, I'm not a SAR person. Tell me what you look for, and we listed. And there's things that are really anything that catches your eye. Dogs, animals, they could be signs of a human activity. They're pets. Vegetation, high, medium, and low. What does that mean? So if I went out, I'm going to crowdsource. I'm going to pay everybody a nickel in this room for every image they say has high vegetation. What's high vegetation? Is it trees? Is it shrubs? And so one thing we had to do is take, once again, operational from end users and translate it. So we don't annotate, we don't pay people to annotate high vegetation. We pay people to annotate trees. We pay people to annotate shrubs, dirt, sand, things like that. And so high vegetation has a very specific meaning in the remote sensing community, a very specific meaning in public safety, but it's not something that we can easily translate to the general populace. And that's a very important part that once I would claim is data science. I need to be able to translate what high vegetation means from an information theoretic standpoint into something that I can train a computer on. The second table is what we ultimately ended up annotating, largely. There's a hierarchical scheme with the important ones. And once again, looking at environment, that's what we talked about. So we went from very specific meaning to a very specific operational community and translate it to environment. So sand, shrubs, snow, trees. And they could be tall trees, they could be large trees, many trees, but they're trees. And there's that trade-off there that we had to balance. And so this is what it starts to look like. You have points and polygons. Now, this is another kind of data science example that's not necessarily data science in name. We have 400,000 of these Civil Air Patrol images. It's really, really hard and human intensive to draw those polygons. And if I said, okay, I'm going to pay you $1 to draw There's 38, 40, let's say there's 40 different polygons I care about. Not every image has it. That's a very daunting task, right? So we do it hierarchical. We say, all right, the first cut, we're going to just put these point annotations. So let's put a dot where you see a car, a house. So we're not asking you to put that big bounding box there, flooding. And then, based upon what we see from that point classification, which also could be semantic classification, we then do the nitty-gritty. So for example, if we have an image that someone labels as flooding or water, we're going to go in and have them focus on, okay, draw me around lakes, flooding, ponds, things like that. If there's no vehicles, for example, in an image, we're not going to have them and pay them to annotate vehicles with bounding boxes because we know they're not in there. And so now we have a mix of labels in our data set. I have polygons, I have text labels, I have points. And so when we start thinking about database storage, it's getting more and more complicated. And so why is this important? So this is another image from Florence. GCV is Google Cloud Vision. This is Google's commercial API. You have to pay for it. They have two different flavors, web entity and label detection, which is not important here. But then there's Places 365. So Places 365 is one of the best and most popular computer vision benchmarks out there. It's over a terabyte's worth of data. It's widely used. It's very robust. And so we ran this exact image through that benchmark. And it said it was a runway and heliport and landing deck and airfield. That is wrong. It's not inaccurate. It is wrong. Now, Places 365 is an amazing data set. Strongly, highly recommend you use it. Why did it fail? It's because they lacked training data. Places 365 was trained on imagery of everyday life. It was trained on a lot of perspectives that were kind of ground level. And what did we do? We showed it an image it wasn't trained on or trained to handle. And you know what? If you look at that, yeah, it does look like a runway from a computer standpoint. I can totally see it being a landing deck for an aircraft carrier. But because it did not have the right training data, it's not robust to disaster and public safety. And this is why we are building out this data set. Because even what we're trying to reduce the risk for industry, for startups, for you guys here, develop capabilities that we can accurately label disasters. If you look at what Google produced, it's better. Yes, that is aerial photography. That is absolutely correct. Is that useful? Bird's eye view, that is correct. Is it useful? Yes, photography, that is a photo. Good job, Google. Now, Google is right. Google sees water. All right, that could be useful. It can see disaster. But what's really interesting down here, it's disaster film. This is real. This is real operational data from Florence, and it's labeled as a disaster film. And once again, it all goes back to data. If you don't have the right training data, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. And so I'm not throwing Google under the bus. I'm not throwing Places 365 under the bus. I'm pointing out this is what happens when you try to take technologies developed for the commercial world and apply it to a public safety space. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but it's largely fitting a square peg in a round hole.
Are those classifications ranked, listed in terms of
Yes.
competence?
Yep.
Okay.
You're just using Google Cloud Vision just off the shelf.
Off the shelf. Because
Later train your own model.
I'm not allowed to do that under this program. But we are going to be releasing these labels. So if somebody wanted to do a really kick-ass transfer learning problem and build something, there it is. If I cannot sell you on the importance of the needs for data sets, for public safety, but also just for robustness, I'm sure when we start thinking about AIs, we want them to be robust against many different scenarios, and they're not right now. And so this is certainly a gut check. It's for us, it's both exciting and depressing because we advocated and we ultimately got up a multi-million-dollar grant to build this out, saying data sets aren't sufficient, and then we show they're not sufficient, so hooray. But this is a problem, and this is why we're building out this data set. This is why NIST is planning to release the data set to free to the public to enable people to develop capabilities to address this. So to wrap this up, how do we store this in the database? We don't know what labels are going to come out of this, right? And so this is really some of the magic about NoSQL and Accumulo, which I don't think you've really hit in the class yet, but you're getting there. So one nice thing about Accumulo and NoSQL is you have to warp your brain a little bit here. We have hundreds of thousands of images, and once you add in video, we're talking with keyframes, millions of rows. All right, millions of rows, no big deal for SQL, right? But when you start thinking about all the different annotations, you now potentially have millions of columns, and that's not good, especially for a dense matrix when it's largely sparse. So one nice thing about Accumulo is you start thinking about, okay, how do I make this a sparse matrix? Because Accumulo, you have infinite columns. Seriously, infinite columns. So I can easily add, oh, I want in the future to annotate something. I don't know, horses. If I was in a SQL database, traditional SQL database, I would have to recompile that entire database, which can be very computationally and time intensive. For Accumulo and NoSQL, I can just add on a column and move on with my day, no big deal. And so you have to start thinking about it differently. So if you had a SQL database and if you want to store the lat-long coordinates for this image, what would you do? You would probably have a latitude and longitude column, floating point, and you would fill in the numbers, right? How would you do that if I wanted to make a sparse matrix for coordinates? So what we do is we have many, many columns. So one column would be latitude underscore 42.000. Another column is latitude underscore 42.001. Another column, latitude underscore 42.002. And so now what you have is you have this incredibly sparse matrix, 99% plus sparse, with infinite columns. So we have so many columns. We can store all these annotations for millions of keyframes and images. The sparse matrix itself for this data set, remember, we have 4 terabytes worth of raw imagery. So if you look at forget about the column names, just the sparse matrix itself, the representation, is about 250 megabytes, less than a gigabyte. If you look at the column information, it's about 8 gigabytes. So we can store all these annotations, all these keyframes, all the metadata, and not just lat-long coordinates, what camera it was taken, what time it was taken, EXIF data, all of that for less than 10 gigabytes because we went and we cleverly designed the Accumulo database, which is its strengths, rather than making a SQL database that is dense and probably ultimately larger than the 4 terabytes worth of data itself. And so what we're doing is we're not storing the images in the database. We're providing a separate data structure, so hierarchical, saying, okay, here's all the raw data. This is how you index it. And that's what the database is. We're allowing people to index it. So going back to that initial query about, well, bridges, for example, is an annotation. You can now very easily say, query the database in constant read time. Give me all data entries that have a bridge in it. And that could be a bridge collected in the Civil Air Patrol imagery. It could be bridges we saw when we had the body cams on. It could be bridges from a new data set, a new data source that we incorporate in the future. And then you can filter upon them that. And that right there is really what I think some of the heart of the data science part is as an analyst, I said, well, what do I want to do? All right, what if I wanted to train an analytic to do bridge detection? All right, I probably want to know where all the bridges are. And if I'm an end user, which I had to listen to, they're like, well, yeah, I want to know where the bridges are because that influences. We're here. Can I put supplies down? Logistics. Do I need to, if I'm FEMA, do I have to pay to repair that road? And so that's an operational requirement. And we hear, okay, I need an analytic to develop bridges. How do I make this as easy as possible as me? So I'm not building the analytic, but I have to think about the analytic developers. I have to think about how those analytic developers can help public safety meet their end needs. And so with this, Google Cloud Vision, they're going to get better and better. That's what it is. They have the resources. When they build in new analytics, Accumula is like, sure, we'll add in a new column. No problem. And that is really, once again, the heart of data science. It's not, I'm not, like I said, I don't really call myself a data scientist. But what I did is, we designed a database that enables a capability that maps back to the public safety space. And with that, it is 5:35, and you guys have been great asking questions throughout. I like that. But that is the bulk of the brief. I'm going to keep this up here because I want to instill this in your brains. Working with FEMA, we've been telling FEMA, hey, 3D point cloud technology would be really great for a response. Yep. And so they're like, all right, let's go do it. So FEMA's like, this is in May of last year, 3D map the entire island of Puerto Rico. We're like, all right, let's do that. And so that was one, working with the end users, and we're like, you can do debris assessment, you can, 3D map, all these great things. And so, one, we have a flight facility, so we got an aircraft. That's for those aviation geeks, that's a BT-67. It's actually a modified DC-3 aircraft. The fuselage was built in 1944. And so we took our sensor, which we built, and we deployed it on that aircraft. So we had to get the aircraft airworthiness. We had to calibrate the sensor. We had to figure out how to get this 10-foot optical bends onto that aircraft without breaking it, because there's only one type of this sensor that we built. You can see that it's got it. Yeah, this is a 10-foot optical bends. It's an unpressurized cabin. So we had to do mission planning, like, well, do we have to bring oxygen for the crew and wear air masks and all these things? We were lucky, this one actually has a bathroom. Some of our other test aircraft don't have bathrooms. And so when you're out in the air for 8 hours, it's really nice, guys, to have a bathroom. We had to think about laser safety, so not seen here. We actually had to put a screen on. If we didn't put that screen on, we would have to be wearing protective laser eye gear. And so this is all the prototyping, right? We're not doing this operationally. It's an engineering test bed, but we're demonstrating this is the type of technology, remote sensing technology, that can transform disaster response. And so this is what it looks like, the data. This is off of the Easter Island of Vieques. And the colors correspond to elevation and MSL. So red is high, blue is low. And you can see the trees. You can see this is water here. These dots are buildings. This is the road. And so the vision of this is, well, what if you flew over the entire island? And then we're not there yet, but the vision is it can automatically identify debris piles, automatically identify landslides. That is a transformative response. Right now, we can't do that. We have to send humans to every single site. So when you think about Puerto Rico, when you think about the Carolinas, when you think about Texas after Harvey, there are tens of thousands of sites that humans need to go to. So if we can do this effectively overnight, develop a capability, we can be talking about covering months off the recovery time. And so we did that, and we did it. And I have to say we did it at lunch because I was down there, and that was very interesting. We fly at night. So remember, I'm an engineer, but we prototype, and that means actually prototyping. So we're there. Crew flies at night because of many reasons. And one thing you don't learn in school is you got to be adaptable. And so I was planning to be on the sensor operating team. And I'm at the airport, about to fly down. By the way, there's this great flight from JFK to San Juan that departs at midnight. You land at San Juan right in the morning, start your day.